So welcome back. This is going to be the last part of the presentation, which is the return to work action plan. I've been liaising with many businesses, many of whom have been looking for input around their design thinking of the return to work strategy. So this section is really just to provide a strategic, structured approach. You may or may not already be doing some of this. Either way, I hope you find it useful. Now, I'm not going to go through line by line. I'm just going to quickly go through it because I think we've kept you online long enough. So step one would really, for me, be analysing the workforce demographics. So figuring out the countries, time zones, locations, headcount per site. Therefore, I'd be mapping out the skills and expertise that I would require to remain as a sustainable business. I'd also be risk profiling those individuals as well, in that, are they able to come back into the workplace, particularly if we've got essential projects that need delivering on, and they're the ones with those skills and expertise. Bear in mind, you might need to consider a contingent workforce, depending on that basis, because I do appreciate there's some very specialist industries out there, and you can't just put anyone into those roles as well. So that would be a point of consideration. The next step after that for me would be around, once I've got, I'm able to analyze that workforce demographics, then mapping out things like what that would look like in play. So redesigning the workplace to establish whether there's enough capacity to house these teams. I know FTSE 500 companies are already utilizing this, but it might be something the mid-cap might want to look at as well, just on an interim basis, which is digital workplace calendars, which will give you visibility of occupied and available spaces, which I found personally to be quite useful. So I think from there, once we've figured out that, I'm just going to take you to the next part of our office, this factory, and get the next slide out. I think further from that would be, as a duty of care as an employer, for employees' well-being, you need to start thinking about health and safety measures, and what you'd need to do to put in place to protect the welfare of your employees. Since I've been working with a number of other businesses, if any of you are interested in a list of PPE suppliers, happy to share my list with you. Just drop me an email, might save you time ringing around trying to find some. So happy to share confidentially prices that we've paid, and if that helps you out, then feel free, like I said, reach out. Further from there, what I'd be doing is, once I've figured out the demographics, I figured out the capacity, figured out the cost of bringing people back in from a health and safety perspective as well. I suppose I would sit back and just assess if it's feasible, taking all things into consideration, things like supply and demand, as I mentioned earlier. It's one thing bringing people back in, and it's another thing to heighten productivity and engagement whilst they're there. So both will need well thought through plans. And then lastly for me would be around communication plan. Here's some ideas I would execute on that would reduce both time and burden it takes to get alignment through the business. So number one would be, bringing everyone into the workplace, is giving them a step-by-step guide on how, when, who, all that sort of stuff. You might use something like this tool that, this virtual tool I'm using at the moment, so people can, visually see what that's going to look like, and, rather than just, turn up on the day and, be mildly surprised to some degree. You might find that useful. Or the other thing that I would be doing is, I would make it compulsory for all employees to go on a return to work induction. This will genuinely save so much burden of going around inducting people, making sure everyone's all right, doing one-to-ones, all that sort of stuff, like you haven't got enough going on already. And then lastly, the other piece that I would do around that communication piece is a weekly panel host Q&A session to answer questions and queries right across the business. On that panel, I would include people like HR, payroll, health and safety, medical, facilities management, a CMO if you have one. You know, rotate it. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to all be on the same panel on the same time. It can be week by week. You know, you just keep rotating it. You might even put your CEO, your ops directors, all that sort of stuff. But really, this will really genuinely minimize the burden of all those questions and queries that are likely to come through. Now, the other part, leading on from this, I know many of you don't have your own in-house chief medical officers. So with the help of my network, I managed to develop a detailed, comprehensive list. It's guaranteed to provide employees with the confidence and reassurance that returning to work would be safe, and it doesn't jeopardize their well-being in any way. So I'm going to quickly go through this. I suspect some of this you've already covered, and there may be areas that you still need to address, and if so, feel free to take these slides from us and execute. So the first part is administration. So I'm sure many of you are already doing it, following government guidelines, monitoring any changes that are going on, but also being aware of GDPR regulation as well. Following on from my comments earlier, I suspect that might require some sort of review and update of policy. The other part to think about with this CMO checklist, there's 5 parts. So one is the administration, one is the people piece, one is the procedure piece, the other piece is the PPE equipment, and the other piece is facilities. So from a people perspective, just being aware, having some sort of declaration to be aware of who's been maybe diagnosed previously, who's been a vulnerable worker, to declare that people have been inducted on the health and safety regulations that you've imposed in the workplace. Also being able to categorize based on medical history, but also being able to provide employee assistance programs as well. From a procedure perspective, I'm sure most of this you're already doing. Again, there are little things that you might notice that actually, that is probably something we need to think about. So you've got your normal stuff, which is your working organizational, shifts, staggered times, and canteens, meetings, but also just be aware of procedures of working from home. Bearing in mind, most people didn't expect this, or most businesses didn't expect this, so they don't actually have a remote working policy. It may be something you want to start looking at, because I'm sure this is likely to be a game changer. The other thing is to think about decision-making processes to reopen. I'm sure your board will be involved in that, but also return to work policy, facilities entry screening procedure, fever and symptoms screening procedure, testing procedure, contact tracing procedure, suspect management procedure, first responder procedure, medical and security evacuation, things like travel procedures, especially where they might require some international travel. We've recently heard that the UK wants, if you arrive in the UK, you've got to shield yourself for 14 days. Well, it doesn't really make sense to come into the UK then. And then you've got things like, your cleaning regime procedure and the waste management as well. So it's just things to bear in mind, depending on the type of size and the type of business that you are. And then last from that is, we're nearly done here, guys. As I said, the other part of the CMO checklist was equipment and facilities. So equipment is your normal standard, do you have the mask, gloves, all that sort of stuff? Do you have a list of suppliers? But further to that is around the facilities. And, one thing that we've been talking to businesses about is just, being conscious of things like if someone is suspected, is there an isolation room, meetings and conferences, no touch sensor doors, perhaps, zoning procedures and office signage, which I suspect most of you are already starting to do, protection barriers, air ventilation. Yeah, you know what? Do you need all of it? Probably not. You could probably get away with some, but it's just to be, it's good to be aware of these things, and just at least these are the steps that you can take. So we've come to an end, and I hope that you have found this useful in building your strategy and approach. If you'd love to bounce some ideas with somebody on your unique circumstances, please feel free to get in contact. You can email us or drop me a mail on LinkedIn, and either myself or Craig will be delighted to engage in a conversation with you. If you'd like the slides or recordings, then please feel free to let me know, and we'll get these out to you. Otherwise, I wish you all the very best of luck and all the success in your execution.